Hey Beans, welcome back to my channel. I'm so cranked to introduce today's special guest, my daughter Elle. Say hi, sweetie.
Hi, we're making butter from scratch today. I'm so excited.
Elle, can you please do this properly?
Mom, it's the 6th take already. I can't even feel my arms anymore. If you're still not satisfied, then film it yourself. Hey, I'm Elle, a high school student living in Wisconsin with my mom. From the outside, there's nothing out of the ordinary about us. Well, except that my mom's a vintage-holic. See, she in fact became a famous YouTuber for her 1950s lifestyle. Living like this was such a hassle, but that's what puts food on our table, so I had to put up with it. However, sometimes Mom even insisted that I join in her videos, like today. Ugh. Not just that, whenever we went out together, she made me wear the cheesiest vintage dresses, so I wouldn't ruin her aesthetic. As a hip-hop dancer, it was torture. See? I sure look way better in these clothes.
Oh dear, what are those awful threads? Here, try this. It's really the bee's knees.
Bee's knees, she said? More like Granny. Ah, so pretty! Auntie, you have such excellent taste.
That's Daisy, my cousin.
And also schoolmate.
Who gets along much better with my mom.
Jeez, I can't let this hideous dress go home with us. If you like this so much, why don't you just take it instead, Daisy?
Mom then walked to the counter with some more tacky clothes, ready to pay, but... Gee, where did I put it? Guess I'll come back another time.
Oh, missing something, Mommy?
It's okay, Mrs. Faye. You're a regular, so you can pay us next time.
Wait, what? No! So, now I had to wear this ugly dress to the boring event Mom was dragging me to. Because the more the merrier. On the way there, Mom was talking a blue steak about how I should behave at the bash. When suddenly, huh? What now? Awesome! This must be the 3rd time this hunk of junk has broken down this month. Isn't it fantastic? And we don't even have phones to call for help.
Elle, I've told you. It'd be ridiculous to show up with smartphones while dressing like this. Besides, people used to live just fine without them. Stop relying on them so much. Trust me, some nobleman will soon come to our rescue.
Stay here and wait all you want. I'm gonna go look for a garage. But I only managed a couple of steps before a fancy car pulled over, and an old man in a suit stepped out and offered to help. Turns out he's one of Mom's subscribers and even asked for a picture.
Thank you so much for saving my chariot. You're the ginchiest.
Gosh, here she goes again with her old-timey slangs. Eventually, we reached this Antsville, and as soon as we arrived, Mom immediately ran to her celeb friends and posed for photos, leaving me lost and confused. While I was trying to navigate through this madness, some whispering caught my attention. Isn't that Faye? She's so extra. I can't even get past the first 5 minutes of her videos. Oh yeah? And still, Mom thought the whole world was her fan. I don't get why she wanted to be here with these fake people that much. I was not having any of that stuffy place, so I went outside to get some air. As I wandered along the street, I spotted a group of teenagers dancing to old-school hip-hop. This is right up my alley. But wait. This stupid dress. My jam is coming on, though. So, letting my adrenaline take over, I joined the crowd. Everyone seemed impressed and even made room for me to shine. Then one of them joined me. I was really feeling it when a familiar screeching voice startled me.
Elle, what on earth are you doing?
Agitate the gravel, now! Then Mom dragged me to the car and drove me straight home. Gringles, do you understand that if anyone sees you like that, the perfect image I've built all these years will be in ruins? Pfft, then don't drag me into these things. Do it alone.
Mind your manners. You should find something more practical rather than dancing like those good-for-nothing lazy bums.
I'd had enough. Furious, I stormed into my room and stayed there all night. The next morning, I woke up to the rumbling sound of an empty stomach. When the coast was clear, I went downstairs to check the fridge for food. Ew, what's that rotten egg smell? Jesus, this fridge must be from Napoleon times! I reluctantly went for an instant soup, but the microwave wouldn't even heat it up. And guess what? My mom spent over $500 just for this thing's useless 50s look. Then I decided to put on a movie to blow off some steam. But the ancient TV wouldn't turn on either. Unbelievable! Is there anything in this rusty dollhouse that actually works? I need to get out of here before going insane. Oh, there's a new family moving in next door. Hang on, isn't that the guy I was dancing with last night? He smiled and waved at me, but I could only force a smile and nodded back. Hey, why the long face? If you're bored, come give me a hand. Then he dragged me over to his yard before I could reply. Once we're done, we rested on the front porch. Turns out his name was Royce. He'd just moved in with his dad and had enrolled at my school. I have to admit, he's quite the charmer, and within minutes, I felt comfortable enough to tell him about my unconventional life with Mom. My mom has way too much free time. I wish she'd find a man. Only then she might quit nagging me.
Meanwhile, my dad is always busy. If he had someone by his side, he'd want to spend more time with his family and be less of a workaholic.
Wait a minute.
So, how about we make them
a couple? Today is the day. Our parents have really tight schedules, so planning out this date took a lot of effort. But so far, so good. I told my mom to check out this vintage-themed restaurant in town while Royce told his dad that he wanted some father-son bonding time. Then, oops, we accidentally bump into each other and join tables. Look at my mom, gracefully fixing her hair and acting all charming. I winked at Royce and then we made an excuse to leave the table so the adults could have some private time. It's been a little while. Let's see how the two are doing. Goodness gracious, was Mr. Phillips slurping on the spaghetti? He's making a mess, and Mom seemed really embarrassed. We immediately rushed inside to save this date before it's too late. At the end of the evening, we thought the worst was behind us. Mr. Phillips walked out without holding the door open for Mom, making it swing back in her face. Gosh. Every beginning is difficult, I guess. Over the next few days, Royce and I beat our brains out to try and find a way to save their budding relationship, and came down to this. Mom, I twisted my ankle during practice. Can you please pick me up? Hey, Dad, I forgot my wallet at the practice room. Could you pick it up on the way home? Then we waited until our parents showed up and went inside to lock the door and even turn off the lights for dramatic effect. I immediately heard my mom's horrified scream. Then the room went quiet. I bet Mr. Phillips calmed her down. We waited a few minutes before calling the security guard to open the door. But contrary to our expectations, the one being hysterical was Mr. Phillips, who was now sobbing in my mother's arms. Wait, what? Turns out Royce forgot that his dad, who always sleeps with the light on, is in fact nyctophobic. There goes plan B. This was bad. Everything kept going south and the clock was ticking as Royce's dad had to leave for another business trip soon. We can't accept defeat like this. There must be something your dad's really good at, right?
I don't know, he's good at fixing stuff.
Ha! Then we know what to do next. While Mom was taking a shower, I waited for my plan to set in motion. 3, 2, 1. Ah! Elle! Help me! I ran over to her to see water shooting out from a broken faucet. After a couple of minutes of struggle, I called Royce's house for help, aka Mr. Phillips. As soon as he arrived, he went straight into the bathroom and helped Mom out of that pool. He looked way too cool, just like Superman. Now, time for his forte to speak up. As expected, he fixed it all in a blink, and Mom even invited the two of them to stay for dinner as a thank you. Great! During dinner, Mr. Phillips kept praising my mom's cooking. He admitted that this coziness reminded him of the good old days. Seeing things escalate between them, Royce and I finished quickly and excused ourselves to give them some time alone.
My dad's right. I can't remember the last time we sat together, as a family.
Then he told me that his parents divorced a few years back, and due to his dad's work, they were always moving from place to place, which really wore him out. Seeing his sad gaze made me feel so bad for him. I just wanted to give him a hug. Hold on. What nonsense was I thinking? I immediately brushed off that weird thought, and we chatted until late. The next day at school, I was talking to Royce as usual, when suddenly our conversation was interrupted. Oh my god, aren't you the new guy? How do you know him? Huh? Where did Daisy come from? And is befriending Royce something strange? Then she whispered to me that Royce's good looks hadn't gone unnoticed by other students. Wow, no wonder I kept feeling like we were being watched whenever we hung out at school. Daisy then proceeded to chime in between us and talk to Royce non-stop, even on our way home, when clearly her house was not in the same direction as ours. How annoying! But good news, back at home, Mom seemed to be floating on air. I caught her humming along to love songs, and she didn't nag me at all when I went to dance practice.
Royce also said that his dad had been in a great mood too. Sparks were definitely flying between them. Our plan finally worked. Good job, sis.
Huh? Was I really gonna be his stepsister? I should be happy with this outcome, right? But what was this uneasy feeling?
One day at practice, I walked in on Daisy and Royce and immediately felt awkward, so I just rolled myself into a corner. Why did I react that way seeing them be so close? Is it possible that I've fallen for him? This can't be. We're gonna be family. There's no way this can happen. After that day, I tried to avoid Royce. Despite his new girl, he still bothered me, but I kept my distance. I was brooding all the way home until I heard my mom talking on the phone as I entered the house. And I'll bake you some pecan pie, darling. Wait a minute. Royce and his dad were both allergic to pecan, so who's she being all lovey-dovey with? The next day, as usual, I told my mom I'd go to practice, but actually lingered outside the house to stalk on Mom. I saw her on the couch video calling some strange man. Oh gosh, did my mom really cheat on Royce's dad? How could she? Still in shock, I glumly lurked to Graffiti Alley and spotted Royce and Daisy there. They seemed to be talking about something really serious.
So, you already knew?
Yeah, ages ago, but it's clear that we can't just force love on someone.
So you mean to just give up and happily watch them see other people?
Oh no, so they knew Mom was unfaithful to Mr. Phillips already? How embarrassing. Right at that moment, Daisy spotted me, so I frantically ran away. After school the following day, Daisy wanted to talk with me in private. However, it was not about what happened yesterday.
Do me a favor and stop hovering around Royce all the time, will you?
But Royce is my friend. I can't just stop seeing him because you said so. If you like him, be my guest. Suddenly, Daisy fell to the ground.
Ouch! Why did you push me?
Huh? What is she doing? At that exact moment, Royce showed up and worriedly checked on her. Okay, now I know what's going on. Sorry about that. Let me give you a hand. When she was just about to stand up, I shoved her. Now you know what my real push feels like. I noticed Roy's stunned look, but just walked off. Now that I don't seem so great in his eyes anymore, he'll stop approaching me. Sweetie, what's wrong?
What's wrong? This is all your fault. If you didn't cheat on Mr. Phillips, everything would be fine.
What do you mean? Cheating on whom? Then my mom burst out laughing after I told her. Turns out they never dated. They both saw through our matchmaking plan early on, but decided to just be good friends. And the person I saw Mom video calling with was her boyfriend, but she hadn't introduced him yet because they'd only started dating. But why set us up in the first place? Finally, I had the chance to tell her how I truly felt about being forced into her vintage world and not being able to pursue my love for street dancing. Mom was quiet for a second and then said, "Gee, how silly I've been. I've been inspiring strangers to go after their dreams, but I stopped my own daughter from pursuing hers." I felt so much better after pouring my heart out. I also mentioned Royce's situation with his dad, and she promised to talk to him about it. Hang on. This means... Mom, so you and Mr. Phillips are just friends, right? Immediately, I ran off to find Royce. As if on cue, the doorbell rang, and it was... Daisy! What game is she playing now? If she's here to mess around, come at me already. But surprisingly, Daisy apologized. I'm sorry, I was just blinded by jealousy. And there's nothing going on between me and Royce. He in fact already rejected me the day you saw us at the Graffiti Alley. Also, he asked me to give you this. I opened the box to see an adorable keychain with "I love you" on it. Oh my, is this a love confession? But there's also a note saying, "I'm leaving for another city. Till we meet again." No! I sprinted to his house right away. Oh Lord, he's already packing. Without thinking, I hugged him and started sobbing. So, you read my message? Yeah. And what do you think? I feel the same, but you're leaving for real? Then, his smile turned playful, and he admitted he was just messing with me. Turns out he was going away, but only for a few days, for a dance competition. Really? That's awesome! But I can't forgive you for tricking me yet. So, yeah. Although we couldn't get our parents together, us two actually became a couple, so our matchmaking scheme isn't a total failure, right? We were even able to change a few things for the better. For instance, Mom spoke to Royce's dad, and he agreed not to move for the time being so his son could settle in. Mom also promised to check in on him when his dad's away on business. As for our family, my mom no longer tried so hard to act like she's not living in 2023. She now sometimes includes modern elements in her vlogs as well, and I even become a regular guest on her channel. Hey Beans, today my fiance and I are baking this fab coconut cake, along with my daughter and our boyfriend. They are hip-hop dancers. Check out their channel if that's something you fancy. They're really the cat's pajamas.
Sarah, it's about time you got married. What are you talking about? Get married? Not a chance. I'm still in school. Oh, give me a break. Marrying a rich guy will bring you more money than school ever will. Mom, I'm not like you. I actually like school. Now leave me alone. That was the conversation between my mom and I about 2 months ago. Well, look at me now. Here I am staying in one of the most luxurious villas in Boston. My name's Sarah, by the way, and I'm 16 and in high school. My life hasn't ever been normal. For starters, I don't have a dad, and my mom is totally irresponsible, choosing to spend any money we have on partying and men. Of course, she doesn't even have a job, so we rely on her latest fling to help support us. My mom has never really cared about me, so I just stay out of her life as well. She can do what she wants as long as I can do what I want, and what I want is to study really hard so that I can have a better life than hers. But as usual, she intervened in that plan, and 2 months ago she forced me to quit high school and get married. Obviously, I refused, and I even went on a hunger strike for a few days. But then one day she said, "Tomorrow, our two families will meet. If you don't rock up, I'll go to your school and tell them you're not coming back. But if you come, you can still go to school, at least until the wedding." Ugh, school. She's using what I love most against me, again, to force me to follow all of her ridiculous plans. Fine, I agreed. I mean, it was just a meetup. It's not like they could pressure me to get married right away, right? So the next day, I followed my mom to go meet Adam's family. I was shocked when I saw him. He was wearing a mask that covered half of his face, and he just sat there, not uttering a word, just staring at me without even blinking. Honestly, it was so creepy. His parents seemed nice, though, and they explained that he'd been in an accident when he was a kid, which had left him with a severe burn scar on his face. So he wore the mask to avoid scaring people off. I could see him watching me, waiting for my reaction. So I tried to smile back. I felt so bad for him. But at the same time, there was no way I wanted to spend my life with this guy. So I decided to put my plan into action. All I had to do was get his parents to disagree with the arrangement. So I acted as clumsy as possible. I wanted to give the worst first impression ever. As soon as the wine was poured, I leaned over and knocked his mom's glass all over her white dress. My mom looked mortified, but I didn't stop there. I ate with my hands and dropped food all over the table and kept chewing with my mouth wide open. But no matter how hard I tried, Adam's parents still seemed to like me, and I could see him slightly smirking at me. What did a girl have to do to put this family off? Clearly they were desperate. Near the end of the meal, they started discussing the engagement. Apparently, I'd move into Adam's family house so we could get to know each other. Then, if I could help Adam to feel less insecure, they'd let me finish high school before we had to get married. So didn't that mean they just wanted a friend for Adam? Someone to keep him company? It's not that bad. I guess I can do that then. So after the engagement, I moved into Adam's mansion. After school every day, I'd hang out with him and try to cheer him up. I'd play him my fave music, show him some epic movies, even try telling him jokes. But still, he barely smiled. He wasn't interested in anything I liked. Then one day I was struggling with my science homework when he passed by and decided to check out what I was doing. Suddenly, he started chatting away, and I realized how much he loved chemistry and physics. He even offered to help me with my assignments. He was so passionate about those subjects, and this was a win-win, because I'd finally found something we could discuss. He even started opening up to me. It was a start. I began to feel more comfortable around him. On one sunny day, I even asked Adam if he wanted to play a game of badminton. At first, he refused, as he didn't like being outside, but I wouldn't stop begging until he said, "Fine. Have you played this game before?" "No." "Okay, then let me show you." I was so excited to teach Adam. Although I'm not great at hand-eye coordination, I'd been playing badminton a lot at school, so I felt pretty confident. Finally, I'd found something I was better at than him. Ha! Okay, so I spoke too soon. After a few missed serves, he somehow mastered the shuttlecock and kicked my ass. Why did you say you've never played this before? 'Cause it's the truth. I don't believe you. Adam just shrugged and then left me lying on the ground. He had to be bluffing. It's impossible for anyone to be that good the first time they do something. Ugh. But it was fun, I guess. Adam was growing on me, but I couldn't be around him 24/7 as I had classes to attend. And no cap, I was extremely happy that I still got to go to school. Plus, at school something incredible happened. One day I was walking through the schoolyard when I tripped over a can. Just as I was about to faceplant on the ground, a hand appeared and pulled me back up. We made eye contact, and I swear it was love at first sight. His name was Brian, and he's super handsome. From that moment on, we texted nonstop every day, and it wasn't long before he asked me to be his girlfriend. And of course I said yes. I was smitten, but I obviously had to hide it from Adam and his parents. One night, I was on the phone with Brian when suddenly a text from my mom arrived. In fact, ever since the engagement, she hadn't even been in touch. Maybe she was too busy spending the huge amount of money that Adam's parents had given her. Sarah, I really need some cash, just around $500. Can you please ask Adam if he can lend me it? What? How have you already spent the money his parents gave you? Stop asking questions, just get me that money, okay? Ugh, money, money, money. All she cared about was money. She didn't even ask if I was okay. I want to ask, can you get me some money? Money? For what? I need to pay for my tutoring class. I haven't had money to pay for the past few months. How much do you need? About $500. Okay, I'll tell the butler he'll give it to you later. Phew. That was easier than I thought. But Adam didn't ask twice about it. Was it because that amount's just nothing to a rich guy like him? Anyway, at least he'd said yes. That would shut my mom up for a bit. If only. A few days later, she texted me again. This time she wanted $3,000. Was she kidding me? I just ignored her. But she kept bombarding me with texts and calls. It went on for days. She wouldn't leave me alone. I didn't give in, though, until this photo was sent to my phone. It was of me and Brian holding hands and clearly in love. Turns out my mom had been so desperate for the money, she'd turned up at my school one day to talk face to face, and that's when she saw us together. She then threatened me and said that if I didn't get her the money, she'd tell Adam's family what I was up to. This terrified me, because then I'd have nowhere to go, and I wouldn't be able to go to school anymore. I couldn't let that happen. I had no other choice but to keep asking Adam for the money with my lame excuses. From buying books, to a relative who was ill and needed treatment, you name it, I'd use it. Every time I asked Adam, he looked at me like he was worried about me and asked if I was okay. This made me feel even more guilty, because it seemed like he genuinely cared about me. To make up for it, I'd bake him cookies, and even knit a cute sweater for him as a birthday gift. But then, a few weeks later, he asked if we could talk. As soon as I walked into his room, he threw a bunch of photos at me. They were all of me and Brian. I couldn't believe it. Did my mother betray me? But that's not the case. He told me how he'd had someone follow me because he felt I'd been acting weird. Not only had he discovered I was dating someone, he'd also found out that I'd been lying about the money and giving it to my mom. He was so disappointed in me. Please leave me alone. I don't want to see you anymore. I was so worried I'd be kicked out of their house, but no one mentioned anything. His parents still chatted to me at dinner, and they seemed happy enough. Only Adam avoided me, which of course made me feel terrible. The only one I had to lean on right now was my sweet Brian. So after dinner one night, I decided to go over to his place. I really needed some comfort right now. But when I arrived outside, through the window, I saw another girl in his room. They started kissing, and I thought I was going to be sick. In a panic, I quickly crawled over and hid below his window to listen in. But aren't you a bit too close with that Sarah girl lately? Don't you dare. Don't worry, Pumpkin. It was all just for you. I noticed that she lives in a big mansion with personal drivers and all. Her family must be filthy rich. So I just wanted to be a good friend and help them spend those money. You know, and maybe that way I could get you the new Chanel handbag that you always want. Oh, really, honey? So, how's it going? Well, a dud. Seems like she's the stingy kind of rich girl. Ugh, keeping every single nickel all to herself. How was I supposed to believe what I'd just heard? My heart was shattered into pieces, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. I stood up and put my face against the window. You're dumped! Brian looked so shocked to see me there, but I didn't wait to see if he had anything to say. I just ran home in tears and locked myself in my room. Sarah, open the door. Do you know how many days you haven't eaten for? Sarah, open the door. If not, I will send someone to break the door down. Oh God, are you okay? What's going on? Nothing. I'm sorry. Sorry for lying to you all this time. I didn't mean to. Suddenly, Adam hugged me and said, It's okay. Don't cry. Now, can you just tell me what happened? In tears, I told Adam the whole story. From being used by my mother to being betrayed by Brian. Perhaps this is what I deserve for lying to you. Actually, if I were you, I wouldn't want to marry someone like me anyway. You're a great guy. As long as you have confidence in yourself and live with a more positive attitude, good things will happen to you, I promise. Even with this ugly face? I looked up at Adam and, oh my gosh, the burn scar on his face. It was worse than I thought it would be. I reached out to touch it. It must have been so painful. Can we start over? Keep helping me, okay? I looked at Adam, smiled and nodded. So after that day, I continued to stay at Adam's house and help him get out of the isolated, self-deprecating life he'd been living. Gradually, his attitude improved, and he even started taking a business course to get ready for taking over his family's company in the future. I also encouraged him to start taking off his mask. Love everything about yourself, including that scar. As for my mom, she's currently being detained for her illegal gambling. Yep, that's what she spent all that money on. She'll probably end up in prison, and even though this isn't what I want for her, she kinda deserves it. Oh, and about the wedding, we postponed it. Lucky for me, both Adam and his parents want me to go to college first and pursue my dreams. Once I graduate, we'll probably start planning our wedding, though, and it'll be truly out of love this time.
Would you ever let yourself become so wrapped up in hatred that you change your entire life to get revenge on someone? Well, that's exactly what I did, and it didn't exactly go to plan. I'm Clara, and I'm 25 years old. It all started 5 years ago when my boyfriend Jason went to study abroad in France. We were so in love at that time, and it wasn't easy being apart, but we coped surprisingly well. Jason even promised me we'd get married when he got back, but after a few short months of him being away, he started growing distant. He no longer called me every day, and he barely even replied to my texts. I thought maybe he was just too busy and stressful to deal with his new life, while struggling with missing me. So I decided to do something wild and fly to Paris to surprise him on his upcoming birthday. I hadn't really thought about it. I just excitedly got on the flight and taken a taxi to his apartment. But, well, the moment I saw him walking into the lobby, I instantly regretted it. There Jason was, but he wasn't alone. He was hugging and kissing some other girl, and she even went upstairs with him. I felt my blood boil, and I wanted to scream, but instead, I just left. I was so upset, but I was also angry. How could he betray me like that? Going a long way just to see my boyfriend betraying me right in front of my eyes was a bad thing, and I didn't think life could get any worse. But I was wrong. Things were about to get much worse. After leaving his place, I booked myself into a nearby hostel and cried myself to sleep. The next moment, I was waking up to a burning smell. Oh God, The hostel was on fire! I was lucky to make it out of there alive, but I was badly burned and left with a huge scar on my face. There I was, heartbroken and burnt to a crisp in a foreign country where I knew no one and didn't speak the language. I'd never been so lonely and ugly in my life. As I looked in the mirror, all I felt was anger and resentment towards Jason. He destroyed my life, and at all costs, I would make him pay for it. After I'd recovered, I got on the plane and flew back to the USA. That's when I started plotting my revenge. I had a few things up my sleeve, but first things first. Plastic surgery. So, as soon as I graduated, I got myself a full face rework. I even changed my name, moved to a new apartment, and lived with a new identity. My life was miserable enough, so now all I wanted was to start all over again. And it worked. After the surgery, I turned into a completely different person, just like I'd wanted. And what's more, I was even more beautiful than before the accident. I felt incredible and couldn't wait to start living again. Of course, I had to work my ass off to pay off my plastic surgery, but it was worth it, wasn't it? More than that, that was also how I tried my best to build a career for myself. Jason would regret cheating on me for the rest of his life, that's for sure. And as planned, after 3 years of working hard, I eventually got promoted to a management position in the construction company I worked for, and became a beautiful, successful woman that many people admired. At the same time, a few of my friends mentioned that Jason had finally returned from Paris and was now working for a big architectural firm. I almost laughed when I heard the company's name. That was our new partner company. Oh, things were about to get fun. My friends also told me that he'd brought his French girlfriend back to the USA with him and that they were getting married soon. What? He was about to get married? They seemed so happy together, huh? No wonder that for all these years, he hadn't tried to contact me once. After I caught him cheating, I just disappeared. I could have been dead for all he knew. But he didn't seem to care. This made me hate him even more. There was no way a traitor could live happily like that. I couldn't wait any longer. It was time to put my plan into action. So I told my boss I'd work on the project with Jason's firm. At least this way, I'd have an excuse to approach him. At that first meeting, I made sure I looked as beautiful as possible and waited with bated breath. Of course, Jason didn't recognize me. And well, would you believe it? He kept looking at me and flirting with me. I found it hilarious and so kept flirting back. And eventually he got the hint and asked me out. What a jerk! Now I understood why I was abandoned in the past. Even when he already had his fiancée, he could still flirt leisurely with others. His poor fiancée! I kept playing along, and even made plans to befriend his fiancée, Valerie. I knew she hung out in a certain cafe, so one day I went there and accidentally bumped into her, dropping water all over her gorgeous outfit. I kept apologizing and told her I'd pay to get it dry cleaned, and eventually we started chatting and hit it off. We exchanged numbers, and I asked if she'd like to go shopping sometime, which she agreed to. This was way too easy. A few days later, we went shopping, and it didn't take long before she started confiding in me about how lonely she was, and that other than her boyfriend, she didn't know anyone here. I smiled sweetly and told her I'd happily be her best friend. At the same time, Jason and I were dating. I pretended to fall for him, even though inside I was furious at him. I even told him I'd share some confidential work documents with him if he pampered me and treated me like a princess. He seemed totally in love with me and spent all his spare time taking me out to dinner and buying me expensive gifts. It seemed like he was no longer interested in Valerie. Obviously, Valerie came to me and told me that she was very sad because the wedding was coming soon, but her fiancé was just cold and acting weird. On the one hand, I comforted and encouraged her, but on the other hand, I seduced Jason and took most of his money. He'd even put my name on the house contract, so technically, I owned his place. You know, I wanted Jason to feel the pain of being betrayed by the person he trusted. Then one day, Valerie called me in tears and said she suspected her boyfriend was seeing someone else. I asked her what her boyfriend's name was and where he worked, and said she didn't need to worry. I'd help her find out. A few days later, I sent Valerie a few photos of him cheating with me, but obviously, I hid my face. However, it was just enough evidence to make her suffer. Then I told Valerie that it looked like her boyfriend was working with this other girl on a project, and that Valerie could get her revenge by destroying the project. That way, he wouldn't be able to work with this other girl anymore. Valerie totally fell for it. It was insane. The very next day, I heard from my colleagues that Jason's crazy fiancée had destroyed the final layout for the design of the two companies' project. She spilled water on his laptop and threw it onto the ground. While the deadline was coming, it was too late to start it over. Apparently, Jason's boss was fuming and fired him immediately. This contract was worth millions of dollars, and he'd just ruined everything. I had to give it to Valerie. She didn't even think about it. That's how dumb she was. Served Jason right. Finally, karma had come and bitten him in the ass. That evening, I went over to their house. Jason now has no job, no money, and he was about to lose his fiancée and his house, too. I knocked on the door, and when Valerie opened it, she was shocked to see me, but not as shocked as she was about to become. Jason saw me and looked like he was going to pass out. "Surprise!" I said. "Hi, Jason." At this, Valerie looked confused and said, "Wait, do you two know each other?" I just laughed and said, "We sure do, Valerie. In fact, I'm the other woman who he is cheating on you with. And that's not all. I'm actually Jason's ex." Then I turned to Jason. "That's right, Jason. It's me, Clara. Valerie, when he came to Paris, he was dating me, and then he cheated on me with you, so I've been getting my sweet revenge." Both of them looked completely stunned, and instead of shouting at me, they started fighting with each other. Valerie was screaming. "How could you?" Jason shouted back. "You're crazy! If you hadn't ruined my laptop, things wouldn't have been like this." "Oh, really? If you hadn't cheated on me, I wouldn't have done that," Valerie said, while bursting out crying. Pretty soon, she found out that the house belonged to me now, and all of his money, and that's when all hell broke loose. I just stood there, admiring how great my revenge had played out. Eventually, they broke up with each other, and I decided to kick them out of the house. So my cherished revenge plan for the past few years has been successful. However, there was just one problem. The price I paid for it wasn't small. When I showed up at work the next day, everyone was whispering about me, saying the project I'd been working on had been a complete failure, and that it was all because I seduced the guy from our partner firm, even when he was about to marry his fiancée. It was a disaster. My reputation was ruined. I couldn't handle everyone being against me, so I resigned. I decided to spend some time at home for a while, trying to clear my head. I didn't get it. I'd spent years plotting my revenge, and now that it had finally been a success, why did I feel so bad? I'd been so caught up in ruining Jason's life. I hadn't thought how it would affect my life, too. I'd been delusional. Above all, the joy and satiety of watching the two of them move out of the house was just temporary, and what remained after that was just a feeling of emptiness. What had I been doing? I was just ruining people's lives, especially with Valerie. She was so innocent in all of this. How could I have been so cruel? Then one day, as I was walking down the street, I saw her at the bus stop, and she looked so sad and thin, and it tormented me. That poor girl didn't deserve this. I couldn't just stand there and do nothing. I had to apologize, so I raced across the street. But by the time I got there, the bus had come, and she had gone. I decided to call her instead. I asked if we could talk, and at first, she refused. But once I said sorry and told her how terrible I felt about everything, she agreed to meet me. I was holding the keys to her old house, and as she walked towards me, I handed them over. She was surprised, but then I started to explain. "Valerie, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. It's just that Jason broke my heart. And for years, all I thought about was destroying his life the way he destroyed mine. I didn't realize you were so sweet, and now I see how awful I was to you. You don't deserve any of this. You trusted me, and I completely betrayed you. At first, Valerie didn't say anything. Then she started shouting at me, saying she'd thought of me as her best friend, and that she felt so pathetic for trusting me. At this point, I burst into tears. I was a monster. The minute I started crying, something changed in Valerie. She hugged me. I couldn't believe it. After everything I'd done to her, she still wanted to hug me. We were there hugging and crying, and yep, finally something good had come out of all this mess. I had a friend, and very quickly, this friend will become my best friend for sure. You guys, honestly, I don't recommend wasting your time on revenge. I threw away so many years of my life obsessing over hurting Jason, and in the end, it just hurt me and poor innocent Valerie. From my own experience, I just want to tell you that always be the bigger person and live for yourself, not for others. Hi, it's Amelia again. In the second part of my story, Jude started working in the restaurant, and at first, it was a total disaster. He made a mess everywhere he set foot in. He was driving me totally crazy. But then things started to change. Turns out, he was a pretty talented chef that could help me with housework. And at work, he was becoming quite popular. One day, he got a date with a pretty girl, which annoyed me so much. But then I found him in the park playing with stray cats instead of going on that date. Honestly, that made me feel so happy. Has he really changed? To find out, let's see what happened next. At the restaurant, there was a new waiter called Oliver, who was a year younger than me. Our manager asked me to look after him and show him the ropes. To be honest, I was really impressed with Oliver, as he was such a sweet guy and a fast learner too. Pretty soon, we became closer, and he was like my little brother. Jude, however, did not like him one bit. He was always shouting at Oliver, and even complained that he was careless and clumsy. Talk about the pot calling the kettle black. We all knew that Jude was the clumsiest guy in the world. Anyway, Jude's birthday was coming up, and I wanted to buy him a new shirt, seeing as he mainly was wearing old clothes from the donation center. I wanted it to be a surprise, so I asked Oliver to come shopping with me, as Jude and Oliver were pretty much the same size. After buying a beautiful sweatshirt for Jude, Oliver took me home, and as we approached my house, I spotted Jude pacing up and down outside. Was he waiting for someone? When he saw that it was Oliver who gave me a ride, he looked angry and stormed into the house. I quickly said bye to Oliver and ran in, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The table was set with a whole bunch of delicious-looking dishes, and there were even candles and flowers. I was so confused. Had he invited a girl over for a date? How dare he? I asked him what it was for, and he said, "What day is it today? Did you forget it?" Oh, so all of this was for his birthday party? I just laughed and handed him the gift bag. He immediately looked so happy. What a child. But then he suddenly gave me a doubtful look and asked, "But what did you do in the afternoon? And with that Oliver guy?" I told him I'd asked Oliver to help me go shopping for his birthday, and then I jokingly said, "But why are you suddenly so curious? Why, you looked so annoyed upon seeing him. Are you jealous or something?" I wasn't expecting what happened next. He suddenly blushed and muttered out, "Actually, yes, I like you, Amelia. In fact, I think I'm in love with you." Whoa! What? I totally froze and didn't know what to say, but just kept looking at him and gasped. He could see I was speechless, so he waved his hands in front of me and said, "Hello, Earth to Amelia." Then he continued, "Well, Amelia, do you, have feelings for me too? Actually, never mind. It's not important. I mean,
If you don't, then just forget it, and we can go back to being friends.
Oh God, I had never seen him so shy before. His face went red as a tomato, and he kept scratching his head shyly. I couldn't help laughing, as, honestly, he looked so cute. So I grabbed his hands, and I couldn't stop the words from pouring out of my mouth. Jude, honestly, I like you too. My heart was racing as I said that, and I didn't know what else to say. But suddenly he was hugging me tightly, and then the next moment we were kissing. I was over the moon. I hadn't realized how much I'd wanted that to happen. It felt amazing. From that moment on, we were inseparable. We lived together, worked together, and in our spare time we went camping, hung out in the park, and cycled to watch the sunset. He cared about me so much, and I don't think I'd ever been that happy in my life before. I didn't think life could be that great. Then, one day, while we were cleaning the house, he suddenly called me.
Amelia, look! How cute these pictures are! You drew them, right? Wow, you're gifted.
I realized he was looking at my box of comic books I'd drawn, which I'd hid under the bed. I felt kinda embarrassed, and told him that I hadn't done any drawings in a while. Then he asked me why I stopped, and I told him about how it had always been my dream to go to art college, but since my mum passed away, I'd had to forget it for a while and focus on just surviving. Jude suddenly grabbed my hands and said,
Honey, let's make this dream happen. I'll help you, okay?
I was so touched and gave him the biggest hug as a response. Jude was my everything. And best of all, he always supported me. And now, he encouraged me to follow my dream too. Time went on, and everything was going amazingly. Until one day, when everything changed. Jude and I were out walking when a luxury black car stopped next to us. A random guy appeared and told us to get in the car. I freaked out and grabbed Jude's arm. What was happening? Were we being kidnapped? There was no way we were getting in the car. But suddenly the guy said,
Jude, this is an order from your parents.
Jude looked shocked and said,
What do they want? They already kicked me out, so why should I come back? They want to show me how happy they are without me or something?
But still, Jude climbed in the car, and I had no choice but to follow him. On the way, there were so many questions running through my head, but I just kept quiet. A short while later, we stopped in front of a mansion. This must have been Jude's house. Whoa, I knew he came from a rich family, but not to this extent. Jude held my hand and led me inside, where a couple, probably his parents, was sitting and waiting for us. Jude immediately shouted at them, saying,
What do you want? I moved out just like you wanted, so why can't you leave me alone?
I had never seen Jude so angry before. It actually scared me. His parents looked calm, though, and they just sat there smiling, and then his mom asked him to calm down and take a seat. The next moment, a maid appeared and brought us some water, but she accidentally spilled some, and she looked mortified. She kept apologizing and wiping it up, but Jude took the tissue and started cleaning it for her. Then he politely said to her that he would come help her make the pot of tea. Jude's parents looked shocked, but somewhat content, and asked Jude to stay as they had something important to tell him. They couldn't stop grinning. It was so weird. Then they told us their news, which shocked me to my core. Jude actually was their biological son. They'd lied to him because he'd had such a bad attitude, and they just wanted to teach him a lesson and force him to grow up a bit. They were sick of doing everything for him, and thought maybe moving out for a while would inspire him to become independent and realize the true value of family and money. What? I couldn't believe what I had heard. They kicked him out to help him grow up? That almost sounded like nonsense, but I guess it had worked, right? He had changed. But how could they come up with such a crazy plan? Of course, Jude wasn't okay with this. In fact, he was furious.
What did you say?
He screamed.
Am I a joke to you or something?
His mom tried to calm him down and said, "Jude, honey, it was the only way. You were out of control, partying every night and spending all our money. We didn't know what else to do. We've been so worried about you. But son, we're so proud of you." Then his dad continued,
"We've always been keeping an eye on you, son. We saw you working in that restaurant, and we are just so happy you've turned a corner and found this independence."
Then she turned to me and said, "Amelia, right? Thank you so much, dear. You've looked after our son better than we ever could, and you've helped him so much." I just blushed and said, "No, it's Jude who takes care of me, actually. He's been amazing." Jude was squeezing my hand tightly, and I could see how shocked he was. Over the past 6 months, he'd been on a complete roller coaster. From being abandoned by his parents to discovering that they'd lied to him just to teach him a lesson. I couldn't believe they'd done it. But to be honest, I was grateful. Otherwise, I wouldn't have met him, and he might still be out there dating gold diggers and partying his life away. So I turned to him and said, "Babe, I know it hurts right now, but your parents did what they thought was best for you. Plus, thanks to that, you were able to realize who your true friends were, right? The ones who don't take advantage of you because of your money." It took a few moments, but then he gave me a gentle smile, and it was like he finally understood everything. He looked at his parents and said,
"You guys are crazy, but if you hadn't done something so ridiculous, I'd never have met Amelia. She's made me the man I am today. Without her, and without both of you, I'd never have changed. Gosh, I miss you both. Mom, Dad, thank you."
At that, they all burst into tears and started hugging, and I just stood there, the tears pouring down my cheeks too. Watching them reunite like that was so touching, and it really made me miss my own mom. After that, we left, and as we were walking home in silence, Jude suddenly stopped and turned to me.
"Amelia, thank you. Thank you for never giving up on me and for taking care of me. And now, it's my turn. I want you to go to art college and make your dreams a reality. Don't worry about money or anything. Just go make your mom and me proud."
I was speechless. I started crying again and gave him the biggest hug of my life. And guess what? We've moved into a new place downtown, and I'm about to start art college next week. Jude is working in his dad's company, and I have a feeling we're going to get engaged soon. Don't tell Jude, but I found the ring box he hid in his wardrobe, though. But I'll surely say yes, and then we can get married after I graduate. It has been a crazy journey, but I wouldn't want it to be any other way. I'm so excited for what's to come. Wish me luck! Hey, my name is Erin, and as you can see, I'm just your normal 18-year-old college girl. But my friends who know me well know that I'm not a girly girl. If given the choice of a shopping trip or beer pong, well, then there's no contest. All through high school, I was known as the prank queen. One time, this girl teased me about my sneakers, so I put a real-life spider in her lunchbox. She totally freaked out. It was so funny. Another time, my teacher gave me a totally unjust C on my essay, so when she wasn't looking, I placed her coffee mug upside down. As soon as she picked up the mug, coffee spilled all over the table and her clothes. I ended up with a week's worth of detention for that, but it was so worth it. So, yeah, even though I was out of high school now, my mischievous nature wasn't going anywhere. I didn't even feel like I needed to change or be more mature because my life was still going perfect. I always had my longtime boyfriend Zach and my bestie Jace on my side. We went to the same college together. Me and Jace even moved out to live independently. Trust me, college life was worth 12 years of waiting. I'm a sociable and active girl, while Zach is pretty handsome and great at sports, so we soon became a popular and beloved couple at college. We were even given prom king and prom queen crowns for freshmen. I could see people admired us any time we were together. It was like our love was a typical relationship that they always wished for. Only I knew that deep down inside, Zach's feelings for me were changing. We seemed to argue all the time, and at the root of it was the fact that I wasn't gentle like most other girls. Ugh. He used to see me as the most interesting and attractive girl in the world. What happened? Once, he took me to a party to celebrate his basketball team's win. We cheered a lot, and at a point I was so excited that I jumped on the table and drank wine with the boys. Everyone around was cheering with joy, but Zach wasn't happy. Then later, when I was getting in his car ready for him to drive me home, I asked him, "What's wrong? Aren't you happy you won?" He replied,
"You're an embarrassment. No one else's girlfriend was downing wine and cheering at the top of their voice. Why can't you just be gentle, like your friend Jace?"
I was fuming. So fuming, in fact, that I got out of his car, slammed the door shut, and walked home. It was such an outrage comparing me with another girl. Not to mention that Jace is the complete opposite of me. She's super quiet and introverted. You know what they say, opposites attract. This is so true, as Jace and I are the best of friends. But there's no way I could be gentle like her. If he wanted me to be more like her, why didn't he consider himself to be as sweet and smart as her boyfriend, Jay? I arrived home to find Jace sitting in tears on her bed. Oh, my gentle, weak girl. That night must be Black Friday for both of us. So I hugged her and asked her what was wrong. She replied, "Jay's changed, Aaron. He doesn't like my meekness and wants a more vibrant relationship. In fact, he wants me to be more like you. He said I should be active and strong like you are. Now I don't know what to do." I said, "Oh, God, boys are so confusing." You know what? Zach said the same thing to me. He wants me to be gentle like you. Jace looked at me with surprising eyes. Really? He did? I know, so hilarious, right? We have to do something to make them realize our true value. But what can we do? And once again, my prank-minded brain came up with an extraordinary idea. And I told her, "I know, Jace. We can swap boyfriends." "No, Aaron, I don't like Zach. And from when you have eyes for Jay?" Hey, don't get it wrong. I just want my Zach. So here's the plan. We will annoy our boyfriends so they won't want to hang out with us for a few days. Then we'll take this time to strike and flirt with each other's boyfriends. Then, just when they thought they're getting close to us, we'll be super annoying. Then they'll realize just how amazing their actual girlfriends are. Talk about an amazing plan, huh? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Jace was hesitant at first, but she eventually came up with my prank. As usual, our boys would soon come back as their old selves. I put my part of the plan into action by asking Zach over to watch the new episode of his favorite show on Netflix. Then, during the show, I ate popcorn really loudly, then continued to make comments and laugh while he was trying to concentrate. Eventually, he snapped and said,
"Are you crazy? I'm trying to watch this."
I replied, "What? You can't stand me anymore or something?" We argued a little bit. Then he said,
"You know what? You're annoying. Why can't you be nice, delicate, and gentle for just a moment?"
Then he stormed out of the room and left. I immediately texted Jace. Mission completed. As for Jace, she went out with Jay. But whenever he asked her what she wanted to do or eat, etc., she replied, "Whatever," to everything. It soon drove him crazy because he didn't know what to do to please her. That was classic. When Jace kept shaking her head when he gave her options for what to eat, he got furious and drove her straight home. OMG, I couldn't stop laughing. So the first step was successful. Next, we needed to approach each other's boyfriends. A couple of days later, I found an excuse to meet Jay. He was a computer genius, so I messaged him on Facebook. "Hi, Jay. You know a lot about computers, right? "Can you help me, as my laptop won't connect to the Wi-Fi and I have an assignment due?" Then he replied,
Sure. Just take a picture of it and send it over.
So I replied, "Can I bring it to your place? You gotta help me. I don't know what to do." Well then, of course, he said yes. So I wore a cute outfit and went over there. I kept touching his arm and praising him. Then, when he became more open to me, I started to tell him how lonely and empty I was, as Zach and I were over.
Oh yeah? How come?
He raised an eyebrow. I sighed out. He thinks I'm too loud and boisterous. I tried to fake my tears. Am I annoying, Jay? He was surprised.
No, you're not. You're an active, outgoing, and interesting girl. Don't let his judgment bother you.
Ha! So my tears worked. So I just pretended to cry harder. He frantically said he knew how to cheer me up. Then he took me to the amusement park. I laughed loudly in the middle of the roller coaster queue, let my ice cream smudge my face, and intentionally didn't wipe it clean. Then I demanded he win me a teddy on the beanbag throwing stall game. But every time he threw the beanbag, I shouted out and clung onto his arm. I knew boys hate being stuck and nagging all day. Like, really, really hate it. Soon, he would realize how awesome Jace was. Talking about Jace, she came to find Zach at the gym, but pretended like it was just a chance meeting. She asked him to show her how a treadmill worked, then used the same way as mine for Zach to ask her out. They went to the cinema to cheer her up. She refused to see the action film he was longing to see, as it was too noisy, said no to any movie he suggested, then eventually ended up in a chick flick. But right at the climax of the film, she complained it was too dark and crowded in there, and made him leave early. How ridiculous! LOL. He must be so annoyed. Then I told her to hit Zach where it hurt, his basketball match. Jace convinced him to take her along to his game, but she just sat there scrolling through her phone instead of watching the match. She didn't cheer him when he won a point, and immediately after the game finished, she asked him to take her home, causing him to miss the post-game gathering. Good work, Jace. He'd come running back to me in no time. I know you're probably thinking this plan was crazy, but it really worked. Jace showed up on our doorstep with flowers for Jace. Their love story had been given the refreshment it needed. Now, I just had to wait for Zach to realize what he's been missing. Only, to my horror, Zach wasn't messaging me. He was still messaging Jace. She ended up sending a picture of her with Jay and told him she was happy with her boyfriend and didn't have time for annoying people like him. Then, the next day, Jace arrived home all flustered. She told me that Zach had been waiting for her outside of her class, then told her he wanted a chance to take her on a date. What? He was technically still my boyfriend. How could he do this to me? Worse still, he was ignoring all of my messages. So I showed up at his house and wouldn't budge until he answered the door. He looked sheepish as he said,
Aaron, our relationship hit a dead end. You're acting ridiculous, and I know you hung out with another guy behind my back. Meanwhile, a wonderful girl came to see me play basketball instead of you. She's the girl for me, not you.
At this point, I had to say the truth. Zach, you don't know what you're talking about right now. Listen, it was all just a setup so you could see what you were missing. It's worked for Jace. Her relationship is stronger than ever. And to my surprise, he replied,
I know. I overheard you discussing it with Jace in the library. At first, I found you so cute because you were trying to save our love, and I just wanted to please you, so I pretended not to know. But then, I realized something. I don't love you anymore. Instead, I love Jace. And thinking about it, I guess I have for a while. She's like a little, arrogant cat that I want to pamper and take care of. You know, I've always liked cats.
What? She's not even arrogant. She only acted that way as part of the plan, I shouted.
I don't care. All I know is I love her, not you.
Ugh! I can't believe it. What have I done? Because of my stupid prank, I've lost my boyfriend to my best friend. What am I meant to do now? Hi again, it's Amelia here. In the first part of my story, I had a horrible encounter with a rude guy in the restaurant I worked in. I hoped I'd never have to meet that kind of awful person ever again. But life doesn't work like that, does it? And ironically, I bumped into him around a month after that, and he saved my life. Then I ended up paying him back by letting him move in with me as he was homeless. And after a few days, I just had enough of his excuses of not being able to find a job. So I told him he could come work in the restaurant with me. I introduced him to my manager, and because he's quite a bright-looking guy, he immediately got the job. However, it wasn't all plain sailing. I mean, what's with his laziness and clumsiness? He was a walking disaster. He broke so many dishes within his first few shifts only, he'd be lucky if he even got any salary. And that's not all. He shouted at a kid who dropped an ice cream on the floor he'd just cleaned. Obviously, the kid burst out crying, which made Jude even angrier. You can just imagine how much our manager had to apologize to both the kid and his mom. And after that, she was furious with Jude and threatened to fire him, all in his first week. Meanwhile, things at home weren't much better. He didn't lift a finger. The place was such a mess, and one time I asked him to do some laundry while I went out to pick up some groceries. Well, I came home to find the laundry room covered in bubbles. And there he was, standing in the middle of that mess, confusingly pushing all the buttons possible to make it stop. He had basically poured the whole bottle of detergent in there. I couldn't believe it. He was useless, and he kept breaking things. I actually had to keep a list of it all, so that when he got his salary, he could pay me back. He was a nightmare. And yet, even though he was lazy and messy, that didn't stop him spending hours on his hair. I kid you not, I've watched him fix his hair for about 90 minutes once, and I swear, it still looked the same. Not to mention, one time I accidentally walked in on him singing in the bathroom while stroking his hair. All he was wearing was a little towel, and we both got such a fright we screamed, and I ran out of there in embarrassment. I came close to kicking him out so many times. He drove me crazy. Honestly, one night I was working late, so I asked if he could prepare dinner. Just a simple pasta. I mean, how hard could that be, right? Well, it was mission impossible for Jude. He burnt the pasta. Burnt it! How does one burn pasta? There were bowls and pans everywhere. When I started shouting at him, he just laughed and shoved me a dish of burnt noodles and said, "Oh, come on, Amelia. I'm a chef. It's art. Now please, enjoy my signature dish, the smoky charcoal pasta." I could have killed this guy, but lucky for him, his humor has saved him this time. So instead, I decided to teach him how to cook. And fortunately, he was actually a pretty decent chef, and he enjoyed it. One night I came home, and he'd made a Thai green curry. It unexpectedly looked quite nice. Still, I was nervous to try it. But OMG, it was delicious. He proudly told me how the chef at the restaurant had given him the recipe along with some cooking tips. That's great. And even though the kitchen was a total mess, it was a start. So I decided he could cook from then on, and then I'd do the washing up. Pretty soon, his 1 month was up. I told him it was time to move out, but he begged me to let him stay longer, as he'd barely got any salary from the restaurant due to owing so much from all the broken dishes. I wanted to say no, but if I was honest with myself, it had been quite lonely living by myself, and even though he was a total klutz, I kinda enjoyed having some company. Plus, he was a top chef. I pretended to be thinking about it for a sec, and then said, "Okay, fine, but you've got 1 more month. Then you're out." He was super happy, thanking me non-stop while running to the kitchen, saying he'd cook me a special dinner in return. Just like that, we learned to get along better with each other, as we lived and worked together. And, well, time flew, and soon another month had gone by, and yet neither of us even brought it up. So he kept on staying. Then one day, while Jude and I were working, a group of stuck-up girls came in. One of them suddenly said, "Guys, look, Isn't that our Prince Jude? Why is he working here like a loser? Then they all burst out laughing. This made me angry, and I was about to go over and say something when I realized that the girl who'd spoken was Jude's ex. I knew Jude had heard, and I thought he'd get annoyed, but he just ignored her and kept working. But the girls kept on laughing, and it was seriously annoying. I went over to take their order, but Jude's ex refused to be served by me. She kept asking for Jude to take their order, and when I said he was busy, she demanded to see our manager. Eventually, he went to serve them, but his ex kept on harassing him. She even dropped water all over the floor so that he'd have to come and clean it up. I offered to do it for him, but he wouldn't let me. And then it got worse. As they were leaving, that girl dropped a $10 tip on the floor. I was furious. What a spoiled brat. I thought Jude would leave it, but he calmly sat down to pick it up while the group of girls all burst out laughing as they walked out of the restaurant. I ran over to comfort Jude, but he just smiled and said, "Hey, I have $10. What do you want for dinner? My treat." Then he went back to work, but every time I looked over at him, I could see he was hurt. I really wanted to yell at his ex. How rude can a person get? Later that night at dinner, we spoke about everything that had happened that day. I told him he shouldn't feel sad about his ex, because she was rude and never deserved him in the first place. But then he just laughed it off and said that it wasn't that gold digger that he was bothered by, but actually because it reminded him of his old attitude and the ways he used to treat people, including me on that first day we'd met. Then he sighed and said, "I bet if I'd been a better person, a decent son, then my parents wouldn't have kicked me out that heartlessly, even when I wasn't their actual son." Suddenly I felt so sorry for him, but I didn't know what to say to make it better. But to be fair, looking back at the person he was back then when we first met versus now, he was like a totally different guy. He had been doing a great job at work, and all our colleagues loved him. One day, a kid dropped her ice cream, and I stared in shock, waiting for Jude to freak out. But instead, he went over and asked if she was okay, and if she'd like another ice cream. I couldn't believe it. He was so sweet to her. I couldn't stop myself from smiling at him. He'd seriously changed. And even though it pains me to admit, he's a very good-looking guy. So naturally, he got a lot of attention. In fact, a lot of girls came to the restaurant just to be served by him. They even openly flirted with him, and he surely loved it. I just rolled my eyes, wishing I didn't have to see that. There was one girl in particular who came to the restaurant almost every day. She was super pretty, and obviously was trying to get his attention. I noticed one shift that Jude was kind of flirting back. How irritating. I guess he hadn't changed that much then. Then one day, I saw her hand him a piece of paper. When he came back to the counter, he was grinning and said to me, "Looks like I've got a date tonight." I was so annoyed and said, "It's not okay to flirt with the customers. I'll tell our manager." Then I stormed off. Later that afternoon, he clocked out first without telling me, and when I got home from work, I saw him being all dressed up for his date, which made me feel so grumpy for no reason. He was whistling and sounded so happy. Then as he walked out the door, he said, "Don't wait up for me. It might be a late one." Ugh, he was driving me nuts. I told him he had to be home by 10 p.m. or I'd lock him out. He laughed and said, "Are you joking? You're giving me a curfew? Geez, Amelia, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were jealous or something." Ew, I wasn't jealous, and I told him that. Who did he think he was? As if I'd ever be jealous of that girl. No chance. And yet, I couldn't sleep that night. I kept tossing and turning, and thinking about Jude and that pretty girl. Eventually, I got up and decided to go for a walk. Maybe I just needed some fresh air. But as I walked into the park, there he was. But the girl was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he was sitting on a bench surrounded by stray cats. I walked towards him, and he was as surprised to see me as I was to see him. I asked him why he wasn't out on his hot date, and he said, "Oh, the date went well.
but I decided to come sleep in the park because I missed your curfew.
That made me feel so guilty. I was about to justify myself. Then he winked and said,
Just kidding. Actually, the date was boring. I did come to the bar and hung out with her for a bit, but I strangely felt out of place, so I made up an excuse to leave. I didn't want to come home too early, though, in case you'd laugh in my face, so here I am. I don't know. I think I'm kinda over dating and stuff.
Wait, am I hearing it wrong? Our playboy chooses to go play with stray cats instead of hanging out with hot girls in fancy bars? Are you really, Jude? I playfully rubbed his head while teasing him. Can't deny, but I actually felt so relieved hearing him say that the date didn't go well and that nothing happened between him and that girl. In fact, I was strangely happy. But what does that mean? Do you wonder if Jude ever actually moved out? Stay tuned for the final part of my story. You wouldn't want to miss it.
I'm sure that you've all heard the phrase, you reap what you sow. Well, I didn't really grasp what that meant until it happened to me. I'm Samuel, by the way, but you can call me Sam. I'm 21 and currently a college student. A few months ago, I did something awful to my girlfriend, and I'm still paying the price. If only I could go back in time. It all started back in high school. Stella and I grew up together in a small town just outside of Nashville, and we were totally in love. When it came time to go to college, we both chose to study in Nashville, but at different colleges. Stella was the sweetest girl I'd ever known, and our big plan was to get married after college and start a family. She chose to study education so she could become a teacher. Her studies were so full on, she was busy all the time, whereas I'd chosen business school, and even though it was busy, I wasn't as crazy as studying education. I actually had quite a lot of spare time, so I ended up joining an entrepreneur club. Seeing as I wanted to start my own business one day, Stella totally encouraged me, and even though it meant we didn't see each other much, things were still okay between us. But pretty soon, things started to change. The more new people I met, the more I realized I was growing apart from Stella, and that, in actual fact, she kind of bored me. All she talked about were her classes, and even though she still loved me so much, she was the same old girl for years. Things just felt dull between us. So when a new girl called Jenny joined the entrepreneur club, I couldn't help but notice her. She was 3 years younger than me and so gorgeous. She liked wearing tight clothes, which could show all her body's curves. All the guys couldn't take her eyes off her, me included. One time seeing Jenny stand in the corner of our club room scrolling her phone, I decided to approach her and see if she was as sweet as her look. I walked up to her and said, "Hey, are you a camera?" She looked confused and said, "Huh?" So I said, "Because when I look at you, I can't help but smile." She didn't even laugh. She just flipped her hair and walked off saying, "Nice try, but no thanks." Even though she hadn't been impressed by my attempt at a pickup line, I couldn't give up. If there was one thing in life I loved, it was a challenge. So from that moment on, I challenged myself to win her over. I know this was wrong because I had Stella, but guys, I was bored. However, a couple days later, there was a rumor going around that Jenny and our club's president Max were dating. Well, turns out this was indeed true, and to say I was disappointed would be an understatement. But I already had a girlfriend, so I tried to shake it off. A few weeks later, I was walking on the street when I heard an argument. I realized it was Max and Jenny, and I couldn't help but eavesdrop. The last thing I heard Jenny say before she stormed off was, "Just wait and see." Then suddenly, she bumped into me and fell onto the ground. I quickly helped her up and apologized, but Jenny said, "Sorry, Sam, I'm so upset." I felt so bad for her, so I offered to take her home and make sure she was okay. I called us a cab and we climbed in. Little did I know Max was watching us from across the street. In the cab, we were silent. Then eventually I plucked up the courage to ask, "So, you and Max, what happened?" And Jenny said that they'd broken up because he didn't like her wearing tight clothing. She said she could wear whatever she wanted and asked if I agreed. So I said, "Yeah, of course. It's your body. If I were Max, I'd be so proud to have such a beautiful girlfriend." After I said that, Jenny leaned her head on my shoulder. I couldn't believe it. Soon, she'd be all mine. But hang on, what about Stella? I decided to not say anything to her at that moment because she was busy with exams. As soon as I got Jenny, I'd break up with Stella. After that, Jenny started opening up to me more. We often text until after midnight. And in the club, she started to bring me snacks and even stayed behind to help me clean up after. She was even flirting with me, and everyone in the club had noticed, including Max. He didn't approach me about it, but I often caught him staring at me in a nasty way. As for Stella, she still called me often, but I was kind of quiet. She came to my place one day and insisted on making me dinner. She said it'd been a while since our last time together. So I reluctantly spent time with her, but to be honest, I didn't care. During the meal, I just fastened my eyes on the phone to text Jenny. I knew that Stella noticed a change in me as I looked up. I caught her sadly suspicious gaze. I was kind of nervous. Was she going to question me? What should I say? At that moment, I couldn't find any excuse for my inattention. But I wasn't ready to tell her the truth yet. My relationship with Jenny wasn't official, so I didn't want to break up with Stella. But still, she didn't say anything, so I also kept quiet. Phew! One weekend, I went to a board game cafe with the club members. Jenny also came, and when it was time to head home, she asked if I could drop her home. Obviously, I agreed, and Jenny gave me a big hug. When I looked to the left, I saw Max watching us, but neither me nor Jenny cared one bit. Move over, Max. Jenny's mine now, I thought to myself. In the car on the way home, we chatted a lot, and she said she'd heard I already had a girlfriend. I found myself opening up about Stella, and even told Jenny how boring she was. Jenny didn't say much, but when we got to her house, she asked if I wanted to come in for a bit and have a beer. I mean, I didn't have to think twice about my answer, and I don't think I need to spell out to you about what happened next. Well, after that night, Jenny still came to the club, and we continued on as friends, acting as if nothing had happened between us. But a month later, she suddenly texted me, and my life flipped upside down. "Sam, I'm pregnant," she said. And she'd even send me a photo of the positive pregnancy test. I was so shocked. How could this have happened? I immediately went over to her place and even bought another pregnancy test for her, just to make sure. Well, there was no doubt it was positive. So I told her I'd stand by her and share the responsibility. After that, I decided to break up with Stella. I talked to her on the phone and said we were too different. She was such an introvert while I was an active and open person. Of course, it broke her heart. She tried to hold me, but I was going to become a father, and Jenny needed me. Plus, I wasn't interested in Stella anymore. Over the next little while, I spent a lot of time with Jenny, and we officially started dating. I went into full-on protective mode. I picked her up every time we went out, like going to school, to our club. In public, I always took care of her, from the smallest things, such as getting her food and water, opening the car door, and so on. And of course, Jenny was very happy. Every time I did a thing for her, she always showed people how sweet and caring I was. Hearing that, the happier I was, and the more I cared for her. When there were only two of us, I brought her food and pregnancy pills to make sure she was okay. I started reading books about raising a kid. She liked to take pictures of all that stuff and post it online. Maybe she was really proud of a boyfriend like me. Eventually, I started to realize that this kid deserves a perfect family, so I decided to propose to Jenny. Sure, we might not get married for a while, but an engagement would at least make things more real. I bought the ring and arranged everything. I chose her favorite restaurant, and just before dessert, I got down on one knee and said, "I know we're moving fast, and you might not be ready, but I love you, and I want our baby to have the best life. I'll always take care of you both, and can't wait to spend my life with you. Will you marry me?" I waited, and Jenny looked shocked. Then suddenly she asked me to stand up and looked so embarrassed. Then she said, well, this is awkward. I couldn't believe it. I asked her why, and she said, "Well, I'm not actually pregnant, so I'm sorry you kinda broke up with your girlfriend for no reason." I didn't understand. I said in shock, "But the test was positive." And Jenny said, "Oh man, I was gonna tell you sooner or later. Actually, the test wasn't even mine. I borrowed it from a pregnant woman. I just wanted to get my own back on Max and prove to him that other guys also want me and that I can live without him." Oh my God, was she for real? I couldn't believe it. So I said to her, "So, you used me?" Then she almost laughed and said, "Well, duh. I mean, get real. We barely know each other. Why would we get married?" "Yeah, well done. You got me," I bitterly said. "Thanks," Jenny replied with a blank face. Then she just got up and left. I felt sick. Turned out Jenny was just a liar. She'd done all this just to get back to her ex. She played me like a fool, and I'd fallen for it. Poor Stella. How could I have treated her like that? And that's when I realized I deserved it. I'd treated Stella so badly, and now Jenny had done the same thing to me. Stella had always been there for me. She was the sweetest girl ever, and my stupid wandering eyes had led me to Jenny. Well, it served me right. But I had to apologize to Stella, even if she didn't forgive me. I couldn't live with myself knowing how much I'd messed up. So it's true what they say. You reap what you sow. I certainly learned that the hard way. And I can't blame anyone but myself. Lesson well and truly learned.
I was so nervous. Like, the most nervous I'd ever been in my life. I didn't even know it was possible for a press conference to get so crowded. Suddenly, the flashes came at me from every direction. It was almost blinding, but the clicking didn't stop, as well as the sound of them calling my name. Hazel, look here! Here, over here, Hazel! Oh my gosh, why was this so chaotic? I started to panic, so I ran away. But I'd only taken a few steps before thump! Oh, these stupid high heels. Oh, hi. I didn't see you there. Well, let's be real, it's kind of hard to see anyone from this angle. Then from every direction, the reporters swarmed in like starving vultures, trying to take pictures of me. I was still confused and didn't know what to do when... Gentlemen, please give her some space. Are you okay? Robert, my adoptive dad, came to help me up. Excuse us, this is her first time attending such a crowded event. If it's all right with you, we'll help her answer your questions. Phew, I'd finally escaped the chaos. Or so I thought. As soon as he got into the house, Robert shouted, "Pamela!" which gave me the fright of my life. Didn't I tell you to teach Hazel some manners? How could you let her embarrass herself in front of the public like that? Pamela looked mortified and kept bowing down and apologizing, but Robert was still furious. If this happens again, you better pack your bags and get out of here. I felt so guilty. It was all because of me that she had been shouted at like that. But I'd done my best. Clearly it wasn't good enough, though. I tried to forget about it, but early the next morning, Pamela woke me up. She gave me a timetable and told me that from now on, I wouldn't need to go to school anymore, and that a tutor would come to teach me at home instead. What? Why all of a sudden? I asked Pamela in shock. It was because of yesterday's incident. The mayor has decided that you need to spend more time learning the necessary etiquette. Are you serious? He can't just keep me locked up here. No way. Hazel? Listen, you should be grateful that you got adopted into this house. Keep in mind of everything Mr. Cornelius has done for you and obediently do as I say. Do you understand what I mean? Looking into Pamela's eyes, I knew I had no choice but to agree. The day of the opening ceremony for the town hall had finally arrived, and I got to leave the house for the first time in a month. A whole month. Now was the moment of truth. In the eyes of the public, I had completely transformed into a proper, prestigious lady. When Robert started speaking at the ceremony, he announced a charity fundraiser for my orphanage, in the hopes that children like me would be given a chance to live a better life. Hearing this speech, I could barely hold back my tears. I was sitting next to my adoptive mom, Eleanor, so I turned to give her a big hug. Suddenly, all eyes were on me, and it seemed I'd finally done something right. I smiled up at Robert, and we both had tears in our eyes. Maybe Pamela was right. I really was lucky to have been adopted by such kind people. But as soon as we got home, things changed. My parents got all quiet and went off to their room, leaving me alone. Where was my praise? I'd done so well, hadn't I? Why weren't they happy? The following days, they still asked me to join them for their events, so I guess I must have done a good job. And while the media and public were around, they were all touchy-feely and affectionate towards me, constantly praising me. We must have looked like the perfect family. But the minute we got home, they'd ignore me, and if they wanted to tell me something, they'd get Pamela to speak to me. It was so flipping weird. I actually started to feel quite lonely and depressed. And even though I was living in the lap of luxury, I missed the orphanage. One day, Pamela's daughter, aka the only friend I had in this enormous mansion, Paisley, saw how upset I was and asked, "Hey, so why do you agree to move into this house? You're clearly unhappy here." Paisley got me. She was the same age as me, so we were on the same wavelength. I was nervous to tell her how I felt, but I knew she would understand, so I told her everything. The thing is, I actually have a sister. She's only 8, and she's called Amber. That's why I was missing the orphanage. She was still there. She's got congenital heart disease, so after our parents passed away, the orphanage couldn't afford her hospital bills. When the mayor's family decided to adopt me, I refused because I didn't want to leave Amber alone. But then Robert offered to pay for her medical treatments if I agreed. And well, the rest is history. You see, I can't just leave. If I did, what would happen to Amber? Oh, Hazel, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. But I need to be honest with you. One time I overheard Robert and Eleanor saying that you were the perfect girl to play this role. Huh? What role? That meant, were they using me for something? It didn't make any sense, but those words kept lingering on my mind until... One time, Eleanor asked me to join her at a charity event, which she said was going to be broadcast on TV. Our job was to prepare homemade food and give it out to the homeless. I was so excited, but when I walked into our kitchen, I discovered the chefs had already cooked everything before the filming crew arrived. I was so disappointed and asked Eleanor about it. She just laughed and said, "Oh, no, sweetie, our job is just to look pretty and graceful in front of the camera." Then before distributing the food, she gave me a pair of gloves and said, "Don't touch any of their hands, okay? They are filthy." Oh my gosh, how could she say such things? Oh, then it hit me. I understood what Paisley had said now. The affection and kindness that the Corneliuses were showing me was actually just for show, all to win over the audience, aka the public, while this was their very true face. I had to do something about this. I couldn't let them keep on deceiving the public like this. So when Eleanor went to the bathroom and took off her gloves, I quickly grabbed them and threw them in the trash. When we went back out, a homeless man approached her to express his gratitude and asked for a handshake. Of course, she tried to refuse, but at that moment the camera turned to her, so she had no choice but to give in. And you know what? The man didn't just shake her hand. He even pulled Eleanor in for a big hug. I couldn't hold back my laughter at how flustered she looked. Served her right. Afterward, Eleanor grabbed my arm and dragged me to a quiet corner. Then she said, "It was you who did this, wasn't it?" I pretended to have no idea what she was talking about, and this just infuriated her even more. Then later that evening when we got home, Robert was already waiting and shouted at me, "What do you think you're playing at?" I was confused, but then Eleanor added, "Don't you ever mess with me like that again." Now listen closely. Don't you miss your little sis? Aren't you curious if she's doing okay or not? That's right. You better have behaved yourself from now on, young lady. I was so shaken by what they'd said. I didn't even want to leave my room. What if something happened to my sister? Then suddenly, Paisley climbed through my window into my room. As soon as I saw her, I burst into tears. "Paisley, please help me with this. I need you to go to my orphanage and check on Amber and see if she's okay." A few hours later, Paisley came back panting. "Your sister? She's not doing good." What? But hadn't she been receiving money for her monthly treatments? Paisley shook her head. "The nuns there said they hadn't received a penny since you left. Now Amber is barely surviving." Paisley's words broke my heart. Those two had been fooling me all this time, and now my sister's life was hanging on by a thread. I had to get to the bottom of this. I walked past Robert's office, and that's when I overheard someone talking. Curious, I peeked in and saw a group of middle-aged men sitting around a table. One of them spoke up. "Hey, Robert, the election day is coming. Is that little girl still doing a decent job?" "Oh, don't worry about her. She's just a silly little kid. She believes anything I tell her, especially about her sick sister," Robert smirked. How dare he speak about my sister like that? I had to do something. I couldn't let this vicious man keep on fooling everyone like he'd done to me. So I took out my phone and started filming. "Speaking of which, how much charity money have we got so far?" $100,000, Robert said, and the room was filled with praise. "Gentlemen, by the time of the closing party for the charity this weekend, we should have almost $500,000 for the election campaign. As soon as I win, your business will continue to be tax reduced for the next 4 years." I had to cover my mouth to stop myself from gasping. So this whole time, he'd been exploiting me and the orphanage for his corruption? Gosh, I was such an idiot to fall right into his trap. Suddenly my phone buzzed. "Who's there?" Robert shouted and rushed to the door. Oh no! Panicked, I ran, but not far enough before I tripped and the phone flew out of my hand. Robert and his men caught up with me, picked up my phone, and deleted all my evidence. They even took the phone away from me. He turned to me and said, "I've already warned you, have I not?" "You're a liar," I yelled. "You haven't paid a penny to my sister." Robert growled. "Who told you that?" But all he had for an answer was my silence and fuming look. Furious, he dragged me back to my room. "Maid, bring me the keys to her room." And then he locked me up inside until the day of the closing party of the charity rolled around, where they'd be announcing the amount of money they'd collected. That day, all the staff were out of the mansion. Suddenly, I heard the door being unlocked. Panicked, I hid behind the closet. "Hazel, where are you?" Oh, it was just Paisley. She found a way to sneak me out of the mansion and told me to run straight back to the orphanage. But no, first I had to expose that sly old fox Robert. Luckily, when I got to the event, Robert was giving his speech. I immediately ran up to the stage, snatched the mic, and told everyone about his evil plan. But I was no match for him. Before I could finish, security was dragging me off the stage, and Robert had already taken control of the situation. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm so sorry for my daughter's behavior. The reason why we decided to adopt her was that she's mentally ill. Since she came to our home, she has become better, but as you can see, there's been a bit of a relapse." What a snake! This jerk would stop at nothing to get what he wanted. Just then, the big screen on stage suddenly showed the video I'd taken, revealing all the schemes of Robert and his accomplices. Now he was well and truly exposed. I watched as he stammered. No, this can't be happening." Right at that moment, the police rushed in to arrest Robert and his accomplices in the stands. You might be wondering how we pulled that off. Well, as I was running through the hallway, I managed to send the video to Paisley. As soon as she received it, she came to find me and saw everything that had happened. So she secretly ran to her mom for help. Pamela then made a plan. While Paisley freed me from the mansion, Pamela set to work on projecting the video on the big screen. Genius, right? A month later, Robert and his accomplices were arrested for embezzlement. And, of course, he got locked up for a long, long time. Both him and Eleanor received such massive backlash from the public, to the point that she had to stay hidden away too. The charity money, luckily, was brought back to the orphanage, and part of it was used to take care of my sister Amber. She's doing much better now. Oh, and Paisley and I are still best of friends. Pamela has found a way better job. And as for me, I went back to stay at the orphanage until I'm old enough to move out. I'm better off being on my own with my sister than being adopted by some messed